Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Iowa State Cyclones Live here on the Voice of College Football Network. I'm your host, Levi Stevenson, also the managing editor over at Wide Red Natty Light, the SB Nation site for Iowa State. Obviously, here this week, talking about the Colorado game this past weekend, which was not a ton of fun. Iowa State's coming off of a loss to Cincinnati, trying to get it turned around. Headed to Boulder for the first time in 15 years, basically. And with an opportunity to get right, even though, obviously things are difficult with the injuries to the secondary and to various other parts of the defense. But, they went in, they were flat. I mean, the defense, I thought, played a decent enough game, but the offense just wasn't good enough. We will talk about, we'll dive into that here in just a little bit. We're also going to talk about, just do a quick kind of recruiting update because a couple kind of important pieces moved for the 2026 class this past weekend. And then I talk briefly about the Penn State stuff and kind of where Matt Campbell fits into that conversation because it's a big job, especially it's a Big Ten job. So naturally he is going to be involved in those conversations and in the rumor mill for that kind of stuff. So anybody that's wanting to ask questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. Really appreciate all that. More than happy to answer those throughout the stream. So Saturday, you go out and early on, from the beginning, basically, Iowa State was able to move the ball on the ground pretty regularly. This was Abu Sama's first, I would say his first game where we've gotten to really see him as a primary back, where this is his game, and they're gonna design runs for him. Hansen got knocked out in the first half of Cincinnati, but I don't think the game plan wasn't there as far as, getting Abu the best looks for him. I think it was what they already had set up. And I was really impressed with what Abu did. I mean, Colorado is not an amazing defense, but they're also not a terrible defense either. But, he was able to, you could see him especially as the game went on, you could see him get more and more comfortable. I would say mainly designed runs for him to get him to the outside, get him on the edge, get him in open space. And I think that was the right strategy. Abu does a lot better on the outside, where he can use his elusiveness and he can use his speed to get past linebackers, safeties, and things like that, rather than trying to weave through traffic and trying to, there was a couple times where he did do a very good job of kind of managing traffic on inside zone carries and things like that. But, for the most part, Iowa State tried to keep him on the outside, and I thought they did a good job of that. For the most part, the offensive line did not have a great day, but as far as blocking for Abu, I think they did a good enough job. At least most of the time. There was a few situations where where the offensive line really needed to get a lot of push, and they just didn't, and it hurt in a number of ways. But despite the running game being pretty good for the most part, pretty much all day, I think Abu had 177 yards, I think 178 yards. Which is a great day. Dylan Lee had a couple nice carries as well. But despite the success on offense for the running game, the passing game just was not there. Early on, we saw Brett Eskelson. The first ball from Rocco was a little behind Brett. It wasn't a good throw, but it was one that any receiver worth his weight would tell you that he would catch that ball. But he dropped it. But it was one of those, like, I was a little behind. It was a tough catch. Not worried about it. Get back to the next one. The next play, they ran Brett on a nice slant. He gets open. Rocco fires a great ball, basically right at Brett's face mask, and he completely drops it. Hits him in the face mask, goes straight to the ground. Unfortunately, this was kind of just a theme throughout the day where the pass catchers just were not bringing in passes. Now, there was a few of those that were absolutely on Rocco, who for the second game in a row was just not good enough. You know, he doesn't need to be perfect, but he needs to be he needs to be consistent. He needs to be accurate. You know, he doesn't have to be not every throw has to be inch perfect and all that, but he needs to make good decisions. He needs to be accurate. And there was a number of times where he just didn't throw a good ball. It's behind a guy, it's too far in front, it's a little too high. On the interception that got picked off by Colorado, uh, I thought the idea for the play was good. Now, granted, this one was a whole mess in itself because it was ruled as a pass interference and then picked up. I mean, it was clearly a pass interference um, by the corner, but apparently the refs decided that because it was intercepted and it was intercepted about 10 yards or so in front of Bramer in the corner, that because of where it was intercepted, the ball was essentially ruled as uncatchable by the receiver, which I I I'm not going to pretend to know the rule book intimately enough to comment, I guess, on whether or not that was the correct call. If that's how the uncatchable thing works, um, if it, I mean, if it does, I guess it is what it is. But it sucks. More importantly, though, that was not a good throw by Rocco. I thought the play design was okay. Colorado kind of sniffed it out. I mean, they had a guy sitting there, so they kind of sniffed it out. But I thought like in general, throwing that ball to Ben Bramer in that situation, I'm good with that. Like I'm good with that play call because most of the time, if that's a good ball, he's going to come down with it, and I would say it's going to get a touchdown. Unfortunately, Rocco, instead of throwing a nice loud ball out there, basically just throws a bullet. Not a bullet pass because we've seen Rocco throw some bullet passes, and when he wants to put heat on the pass, he puts a lot of heat on it. But he threw it with very little arc on the ball, and the Colorado guy just jumped up and grabbed it. I mean, if he had lobbed it into the end zone like he should have, or you don't even need to lob it, but get it up a little bit and let it kind of float in there and let Ben Bramer use his height. Right, that ball was going basically at Ben Bramer's head while he was sitting on the ground. Put that thing a couple feet higher, the defender can't get to it, and only Ben Bramer can get to it. So, it's stuff like that. Like, yeah, it sucks that the penalty got picked up, but that ball was terrible. It should have never been picked off. And if it wasn't picked off, you probably get the call there. So, there's a couple of those there, and there was a couple ones. Abu was wide open on the sideline on one throw, and it was kind of, he was kind of running down. And it was kind of over his back shoulder, and he ended up missing the catch. And could he have caught that? Yeah, he could have caught that, but it was not a great throw by Rocco. I mean, it was behind him, and he had to turn around and go back and get it, even though he was running at full speed. Had he caught that, I'm not like he might have taken it to the house. He was wide open, and it just poor execution all the way around. Um, I was glad to see Rocco. Rocco took some accountability um, for kind of how he played. He was very emotional in the post game press conference. I thought I thought he showed some good leadership there. And let me pull up the clip for you. I think it's worth watching. Let me pull this up. Okay, let me make that a little bit bigger for you guys. Okay, so you can see he's pretty clearly. So, I mean, it's clear that he's taking good ownership for it. That's good leadership on his part. Um, where I that gives me hope going forward that they're going to get it figured out. Like, I mean, they're still 5-2. They've still got a lot left to play for. Uh, they are probably out of the Big 12 race unless they get a lot of help. Utah needs to lose a couple games. You can assume Tech's probably not going to lose anymore. Their schedule is very, very is pretty soft going down the stretch. You need Cincinnati to lose. You need Utah to lose. You need a number of teams to lose on the way out. And right now the Big 12 title game might be off the table now, but you can still you still want to be able to put together a successful season and build going into build out the rest of this, get to 9 or 10 wins, and then you can recapture some of that momentum going into next season when you're going to get Jeremiah Cooper back, you're going to get John Tez Williams back, you're going to get a lot of these guys that are injured back. You lose Dominic Orange, but it is what it is. They'll have guys. They might go see if they can get someone in the portal, whatever it is. Uh, I there's still a lot left to play for, and I know it's funny because we're at the point now as Iowa State fans where we've 10-2 last year and went to the Big 12 title, and you want it. Ideally, you see continued growth year over year, but fortunately, college athletics, that's just not how it works. The perpetual growth just one isn't realistic. It's arguably not like possible to just get better every single year. You're going to lose some guys. You're going to have some bad breaks. You're going to have some injuries. You're going to have some bounces go your way. That's just the nature of college football. And it's disappointing that for the second year in a row now, we're dealing with massive injuries all over the place. Last year was linebackers. This year it's secondary. There's still a lot to play for. I refuse to live in a world where, getting to a fun bowl game is worthless. I refuse to live in that world. Not every bowl game, not every bowl game is amazing and all that, but like getting to the Pop Tarts Bowl or getting to the Texas Bowl and playing an SEC team, that stuff is fun and it's worthwhile, but it's also, you can't just stop playing because you're not playing for a conference title. And I mean, I would say it's not mathematically out of it by any stretch, but it's more just like kind of a combination of what Iowa State has left and what other teams have left to play. But you still have so much to play for, and it'd be a massive injustice to the senior class to not finish this thing out and try to do everything you possibly can with the season, win as many games as possible. I know everybody in that building is just sickened by everything, just by how everything has gone. I would be surprised if as the season goes on, uh, or as we kind of get going and go into next season and things like that, that we don't see some experimentation with different structural things. Like the last 2 years, you know, Iowa State has been able to get out to good starts, but they've also dealt with massive injuries to a position group, those are at least correlated, maybe possibly causative of one or the other, in that they changed how they handle fall camp and spring practice and all that in order to be able to be more ready to go at the beginning of the season, so that way they're up and running, and they don't have to deal with some of these slow starts that we had gotten accustomed to in the Matt Campbell era. My guess is that will get reevaluated. I would like to not go back to you're hanging on for dear life for the first couple games, and then just you're trying to play catch up in October and November. You start the season 2-2, and then now you're playing catch up all the rest of the year. I don't want to go back to that, but there's a happy medium to be had between being able to start 5-6, 5-6-7-8-0, and having to deal with all these injuries. and then you know, and starting 2-2, having to catch up, but largely staying healthy for the most part. There's a happy medium to be had. They need to find it. Um, but that's a task for the off season. For the rest of this season, it's trying to figure out how to get this passing game up and going. They need to find pass catchers. Chase Soul has been very good. I think he will continue to be good. Xavier Townsend hasn't gotten as much volume as I kind of thought he would get. I kind of thought he would start getting more. I was thinking he would be like an 8 target a game kind of 8 to 10 target a game kind of guy. He's not quite there yet. Granted, he's also only half season into the into his first year of the offense. And you would expect him like next year to really take a nice him and Chase to take a nice step nice step forward. But they need to find guys. Brett Eskelson and Bradam Overby have to be more consistent. Brett Eskelson has generally been pretty good up to this point in the season, but he dropped a couple passes on Saturday. Dom Overby has at times been really nice, a really good spot. He made made a nice catch against, had a couple nice catches against Colorado. But Cincinnati dropped some ball. Arizona dropped some balls. Arizona had some really, really awful drops. And those guys need to get it together. I mean, straight up, you're playing power 4 football. You shouldn't be dropping passes. I mean, things happen. People make mistakes. I get it. But you should not be in a spot as a power 4 receiver at the college level where you're dropping consecutive passes. It's just not acceptable. And I know they're young. I know they're freshmen, redshirt freshmen in the case, in their case. But guys, you have to be more consistent. Period. The passing game has to be better. Now, it's a two-way street here. Rocco can be playing better. He needs to throw some better balls that are more catchable for these guys. But they're still dropping ones that are well thrown balls that are right where they need to be. They're right in the breadbasket, and they're still dropping them. The receivers need to do a better job of getting open, and they need to do a better job of catching the fucking ball, and then that will help everything else go along. There was a couple times on Saturday where they were in odd situations, 3rd and long, or in the red zone, where the play calling got weird and got overly cute, and it just didn't work out. And Taylor Mauser deserves criticism for that. Absolutely. He deserves criticism for that. But between the 20s, he called a really good game. The receivers and the quarterback just flat out did not execute where they needed to. If you don't drop those passes and Rocco's more accurate, we're probably talking about a completely different thing here. And I would say we're winning by a couple touchdowns, and we're not having any of these conversations. So, Brian's chiming in. Having our tight ends be the top 2 receivers is not acceptable. So I want to push back on that just a little bit, because I don't think it matters necessarily who's catching the ball. I don't think it matters necessarily who's catching the ball. It matters where they're catching the ball and what they're doing with the ball afterwards. If your tight end is averaging 12 or 15 yards a catch, I don't really care. Like that's fine. I'm not worried about that. I think that's a perfectly fine, number 1 receiver catching 6 balls a game at 10 yard at 15 yards a pop is a really nice. That's a really good receiver. I think the issue there, though, is that Bramer and Burkle are more trusted targets. They've been in the offense longer. But it's been very clear the last few weeks, really, I would say really starting with the Arizona game, I would say we've seen Chase Soul has very clearly established himself as the number 1 receiver. They're clearly getting more comfortable. They like throwing to him. They like getting him targets in one-on-one scenarios. They're getting there with the receivers, with that receiver, I should say. And Xavier Townsend Xavier Townsend thing is interesting because they're not getting like a ton of touches throughout the game, but like I haven't seen him drop a ball. Like I haven't seen anything from Xavier Townsend that would lead me to believe that he isn't deserving of more snaps. Like it seems to me that it's very clear that he deserves to be getting more targets. It seems to me like he's doing a good job. So I'm not exactly sure why they're not making a more concerted effort to get him the ball. I mean, I know that they've got lots of guys that can handle it. Chase, the tight ends, Abu, they've got lots of guys that they can throw the ball. But I would prefer to see some more out of Xavier Townsend because the guy is really fun to watch. He's got the speed to stretch the field. You can give him on a jet sweep and he can turn the corner. You can be really you can be really versatile with how you use him, or as Matt Campbell would like to say, you can be very multiple with how you use Xavier Townsend. And so, I need to see more out of that too. But the offensive struggles from the last 2 weeks really do come down to one big factor, and that is red zone. Right now, Iowa State is, they've played an extra game. They played one more game than a lot of teams, but they are currently, I believe, or they're tied for first in the country right now in red zone trips. If you go on red zone trips per game, they're at like 40th or something like that, which is not great, but it's not awful. But they're at like 115th right now in red zone scoring rate. They're only at like 73%. You know, flat out, there's way too many drives dying in the red zone. It's that is basically the entire problem. They get into the red zone and things just kind of fall apart a little bit. They're taking too many procedure penalties. The I would argue the play calling at the goal line is not great. I think they tend to try to get too cute at the goal line. They're playing like nice spread. They're playing nice and spread throughout most of the field all the way up, and then they get to the goal line, and all of a sudden we turn into a wing T offense, and it's kind of weird. Um, I'm not really sure why they do that, but also the offensive line not getting push in the final 10 yards of the field, basically, where you need them to get up and you don't need to, and get to the second level and open up some running lanes for your running back to go through. And they just were not doing it at all on Saturday. So fixing these red zone issues will alleviate a lot of things. And I do think that a huge contributing factor to this absolutely is the absence of Kyle Conradi. I think that is inarguable. He provides a level of comfort for the staff and for the offense that just cannot be replaced. And even if it was Jace Gilbert taking these kicks, which he's kicked in the past, you're fine with them, letting Jace Gilbert take one from 40 or maybe even 45. Like you're generally fine with that. But you're not even at that. You're at Chase Smith, and that this is not a shot at Chase Smith. Chase Smith is not as good a kicker as either Kyle Conradi or Jace Gilbert. His leg goes maybe to 35 if he gets a hold of one. It's not you can't stop at the 35-yard line and be like, oh, that's okay. We're gonna get some points. You're to the point right now where it's kind of either touchdown or bust for Iowa State, and that. So yeah, I think this is kind of working in the opposite way you think it would. So you would think that if you don't have the luxury of a kicker, that would say, okay, it's touchdown or bust. We've got to get points. We need to be aggressive. It's 4-down territory. We need to be aggressive and keep the ball moving. But I think how it's actually working is when they have Kyle Conradi, they are more likely to take some shots, to run that pop pass, to take a little bit more risk, or maybe take a little bit more high risk, high reward type play, and run with that, knowing that it's okay if it doesn't work out. We've got Kyle to give us 3 points. And like those types of plays are typically the ones where Iowa State does actually pretty well on. It's where it's the balls to the corner to Chase Soul or Ben Bramer or Gabe Burkle or whatever. It's you run that pop pass on 3rd and short. It's that kind of thing, or it's running that like screen off to the side with Carson, like the naked screen off to the side, like we saw against Kansas State Kansas State, and I think they ran it against. I want to say they ran it against Arizona as well. That kind of stuff. They are not running that right now because I think they're a little bit scared to, like, if the ball's incomplete and now we're at 2nd and 10, now we're panicking a little bit because we know that we're still on the 35-yard line. We cannot take this field goal. It's just not possible. We can't make this field goal. And so they're choosing for lower risk, lower reward plays in hopes that they can just string a few of them together. They're hoping, they're trying to get 3 or 4 yards, 3 yards, 4, 3 yards, 3 yards, 3 yards, 3 yards type of thing, and just keep nickel and diming them down instead of taking some of those shot plays where they can win the one-on-one matchups. And I believe Kyle Conradi not being there is absolutely the cause of that. It's not the only thing. I mean, at a certain point, you have to expect, like, there should be an expectation that Mauser would adjust and figure out the play calling sequence and how he's going to do that in the plus side of the field and in the red zone. But, if Kyle Conradi's back for BYU and he's at full strength and he can kick the kicks he normally takes, I think that takes a lot of pressure off the offense. They can be more aggressive, and and a lot of this clears itself up. But if he's not back, they need to adjust and say, you know what? It's kind of touchdown or bust. Once we get across the 50, it's touchdown or bust, basically. Even or say across the 40, when you're really kind of too close to punt. If you're inside the 40, it is touchdown or nothing. You have to play like that. But that doesn't mean you get scared. That doesn't mean you try, you run a bunch of 3 or 4 yard plays. You keep the ball moving like you were in the middle of the field. I mean, obviously you don't have all the space that you do in the middle of the field, but you have most of it, and you can still run lots of different things that help you. Colorado runs a lot of man defense. We did not see very many slants. Slants are like the number one way to beat man defense, and we didn't run very many at all. We ran one earlier, and Brett Eskilson dropped, he took it right off the face mask and dropped it. And again, this goes back to execution. Number one, quarterback needs to make a good throw. Receiver needs to catch that good throw. And then we can adjust play calling from there. The play calls on Saturday were absolutely good enough to win that football game. Period. End of story. They were good enough to win that football game. If the offensive line is better, Rocco's better, the receivers are better. Period. The Iowa State was, the play calling was not the problem, was not the reason that Iowa State lost on Saturday. But because they were in situations that they were in because of the lack of execution, they got put in some situations where they just didn't make a great play. They didn't make a great play call. 3rd and 10, they ran naked QE power out of the empty. I'm fine with that play call on 4th and 4 when you're trying to catch the defense off guard a little bit and you think you can get some space. 3rd and 10 is kind of dicey, especially when you know that, like, if you don't get to 3rd and 3, you're punting this thing. So you got to feel damn confident that you're going to get 4 or 5 yards out of that thing before you even think about calling that. And they got none. And then they punted it. They went for it on their own 20, which was a very confusing decision and unnecessary. And they punted it on the plus 38 or something like that. So the decisions on when to punt, when to go for it were confusing. But again, they were only in that situation because of a lack of execution in other areas. And that's not just, lack of execution isn't necessarily just on the players. That's also partially on coaching. The procedure penalties, the false starts, the illegal formations, the illegal shifts, those are 100% coaching. Period. They are coaching. You have to be able to get these guys in a spot where they're not shooting themselves in the foot and they're not getting into the red zone to 4th and 1 after Abu Sama nearly scores, and then you eat a bunch of penalties, and now you're at like 4th and now you're at 1st and 10 instead of 1st and 1 on the, you're at 1st and goal from the 10 instead of 1st and goal from the 1. Changes your play calling, changes everything. It's execution, it's detail, which I know that by saying that word, I know I just probably pissed somebody off because they're probably tired of hearing that word from Matt Campbell. But it's what it is. It's execution, and it is coaching, it's precision, and making sure that you've got that easy stuff taken care of. We're in the middle of the season. I mean, false starts can happen if you are, you're a little overeager trying to, get a good jump off the snap and all that. Sometimes those happen, whether it's the noise or it's you maybe miss the snap count from the quarterback, whatever it is. That happens. Illegal formations and illegal shifts should never happen. Never, never, ever, ever happen. If you are a receiver, you should know when you need to have a foot on the line or a foot up to the line. You need to be on the line of scrimmage, and you need to know when you need to be when you need to be a yard or two back. You need to know that. Period. You need to know that only one player is allowed to be moving when the ball is snapped. That's it. It's like there's no good excuse for illegal shifts and illegal formations at this point in the season. You should know the playbook. You should know when the motion is, where the motion is, and exactly if you're the one even in motion. It's stupid. Like that has to be coached away from this team. Like for the most part, Iowa State does not get penalized very much at all, and they really can't afford to. If Iowa State was a high penalty football team, we'd be winning 5 or 6 games. We'd be topping out at 5 or 6 wins and not 10. But currently, the procedure penalties are out of control. Too many false starts, too many illegal formations, too many illegal shifts. They have to get this figured out. Period. So, that's really what's kind of on the checklist, I guess, for the bye week is receivers need to be on the jugs machine. They need to be running routes with Rocco. They need to get on the same page. Rocco needs to be like if anybody in that quarterback room or in that wide receiver room goes home this weekend instead of going to the indoor facility or going to a practice field someplace and running routes and getting shit together, that's garbage. You have to be in there. You have to be doing this shit. You have to get this figured out, because if Iowa State can't throw the ball, they can't win football games. If they can't run the ball, they can't win football games. If they can't throw the ball, they can't win football games. They have to be able to do both. Period. It's a balanced system, and this thing has to work. Rocco needs to be better. He knows he needs to be better. That's great. He's an awesome upperclassman leader of this football team. If he's not immediately calling the receivers to run extra routes after practice every day, this weekend, whatever it is, that needs to be fixed so fast. And I'm not sure exactly, in just running routes and catching passes against nobody, against air in the practice facility may not be enough. I'm not sure exactly what they need to do to get this right, but it absolutely has to get better, period. Otherwise, Iowa State's not going to win a lot more football games. Oklahoma State's terrible, and you really have to kind of mess that one up to not win that one. Other than that, they're all winnable. Every game from here on out is winnable. Iowa State absolutely is good enough football team to run the table, finish 10-2, and see what happens with the tiebreakers. They are also not good enough to play poorly and still win a bunch of these games. If Rocco is still very mediocre in a lot of these games with where the defense is at and how banged up it is, and just, I thought they played pretty decent in Colorado except for a couple plays. There was a couple communication errors that happened that can get fixed pretty quickly. Otherwise, I think most of the defense did a decent enough job. I thought Cooper Abel was awesome. Cooper Abel was an animal on Saturday. He deserves a lot of credit. But Jamison Patton was routinely out of position on a couple plays, and it's just, other than that, I thought the defense was solid. The defense did enough to win on Saturday, even with all the injuries. But if the offense can't get this thing together, Iowa State is going to be scraping for. The teams remaining on their schedule are all good enough to beat Iowa State and put them in a situation in which Iowa State is playing for bowl eligibility down in Stillwater in the last game of the season. I don't think that will happen. I think they will get this figured out, hopefully this weekend. But that is absolutely, the top end is 10-2, the bottom end is 6-6. Technically 5-7. I think something would really have to go wrong to lose to Oklahoma State. They're just really, really bad. But that window is absolutely still there. And if Rocco is not better, if the offensive line isn't better, if receivers aren't catching the football, any amount of misery is still on the table, unfortunately. So it's a pretty easy to identify list that doesn't require a lot of heavy analysis, but it's Rocco and these receivers absolutely have to get on the same page. They have to be sharper. Period. They have to. Um, Hopefully, going back into BYU, obviously a part of any bye week, it's getting healthy. So it's guys getting their bodies taken care of. Hopefully, Dom Orange, his shoulder starts healing up a little bit, so he can start playing better. Hopefully, you get Kyle Conradi back. If you don't think you're going to get Kyle back, you absolutely have to play. Absolutely have to readjust how you call plays on the plus side of the 50 to make sure that you're giving yourself a chance to score touchdowns anytime you get across there. Um, Maybe you can get Carson Hansen. Hopefully, you get Carson Hansen back from his concussion. That'll be 3 weeks. I would think that he would be ready to go by then, but concussions can go. They can be a 1 week, they can be a month, they can be 2 months. It just kind of depends. So, hopefully you get Carson Hansen back. Hopefully you get Kyle Conradi back. You'd love to see Dom Orange have that shoulder heal up a little bit. And maybe it's just one of those things where Dom's shoulder just is what it is until the end of the season. If it is, you hope he can play through it. You hope it doesn't affect kind of his ability to continue to play hard. And Trey Bell and Quentin Taylor and the safeties need to get on the same page, make sure they're on the same page, keep improving, keep watching tape, all that. So BYU's beatable. Arizona State's beatable. TCU is beatable. Kansas is beatable. You've still got a lot of winnable games left on the schedules, but you have to be better. You have to be sharper. Okay, enough of that. Next up, let's do a quick recruiting update. So we'll go with the bad news first. Saturday morning, like 8 o'clock in the morning, like a couple hours before, a few hours before that game started. Brian Wessel he was recruited to Iowa State to be a defensive lineman, flipped from Iowa State to Missouri on Saturday morning. I think there were some people that were kind of expecting that to come at some point, but unfortunately it's a decent size loss for Iowa State. He was one of the highest rated in the class. He might have been the highest, he's one of the highest rated guys that was in the class at the time. I think he actually might have been the highest rated in the class prior to him leaving because, since Jet Thamal had decommitted, but he was either the highest rated or like tied for the highest rated. And unfortunately in Missouri, because they're the only team in the state, Eli Drinkwitz is a good recruiter. Missouri is pretty competitive now. That was going to be a tough one to win. The in-state poll in Missouri is stronger than in a lot of states, especially since they said Missouri is the only team in that state that matters. I mean, they have Missouri State technically, I guess, but he probably grew up a Missouri fan. So as soon as he gets that offer, he's flipped. It sucks, but it is what it is. Now, the exciting part is Iowa State picked up quarterback in the form of Case Evans, who was previously committed to Oklahoma State, then obviously decommitted after Oklahoma State fired Mike Gundy. And I tell you what, I've been looking at some of his tape here, and it's really interesting to watch. I think he's a nice talent. I'm going to pull up some of his tape here in a second, because I think I'm really impressed by some of these throws that he makes. He's mobile enough to stay safe, to get out of the pocket, to scramble a little bit, kind of like Rocco, kind of like Brock was, but not a primary runner. Like, I don't think you're gonna. I mean, it's Iowa State. They're gonna run. So they're gonna scheme up some. They're gonna scheme up some QB powers and stuff like that for whoever's playing quarterback. But he's good enough as a runner to kind of get where he needs to be, and take care of himself. But let me pull up he just the other day, and granted, I mean, as always, these are highlights, so you're not going to get, his incompletions, his interceptions, and stuff like that. You're not going to get all that. But I do want to take a look, so you can at least see what he does really well, and it's very easy to see. I think he's a really interesting prospect. I think Iowa State got, Yeah, Jet Tamala would be nice to have, but I tell you what, when you already have Alex Mansky there and you feel like he can develop into your quarterback of the future after Rocco, you know, and you can take a flyer on a guy that you think you can develop, and in that you if he works out and turns out to be amazing, great, you've got that guy. But the nice thing is you have the insurance of Alex Mansky where you feel like he can really be the guy of the future. So let's take a look at Case Evans here. So does a nice job there on that bootleg, gets his hips turned around, fires a decent ball. Receiver doesn't catch it, unfortunately. Kind of same deal here, but you can see the nice throw, same ball. Gets around. They were in a lot of bootlegs, but he looks good doing that. He's not super stiff or anything like that. He's pretty fluid. Um, Nice live arm. I mean, just the arm motion is nice. Does a good job getting out. He throws from a little bit lower arm slot, kind of a 3/4 arm slot. You'd probably be able to see it here pretty good right here. Yeah. So he's kind of throwing more of like a 3/4 arm slot, but he throws a nice ball. Uh, this seems like a guy that can really develop. He's got a decent arm there. It's good ball. Guy was wide open, but stood in the pocket. That's a tough spot right there to throw out of. Really, because he's backed up against his own against the end line in the back of the end zone, and he's got a guy right in his face, and he delivers a really nice ball. It's a great throw. He sets back. Eventually, you'd like to see this delivery shorten up just a touch, but it's not such a long delivery that you're worried about it really. I don't think it's like a point of concern so much as just like if he wants to continue to get better at what he does, you know, that's a thing he can work on. But you can see right there. I mean, he's not slow. He's mobile enough that he can take a bootleg, throws a decent ball there. Um that's a nice lead ball to the outside on that out route. He just throws it. He throws a nice ball. He's got a good live arm. There's a lot to like here. I mean, like I said, he's not perfect or anything like that. Like I said, I think you could clean up that rotation. You could clean up that arm motion a little bit, maybe shorten it up a touch. But I mean, that's good touch right there. I think this is a really nice guy to have in the program. Yes, yeah, you hope that, like, as with any Iowa State quarterback, yeah, they need to have good leadership traits. They need to be tough, um, and all that. But I think from what I can see there, that seems like a guy that absolutely has the chance to develop into a really nice quarterback prospect, and a guy that if that I think he'll get an extra. He will get a year. I mean, because next year, because you assume Rocco will come back, so he and Mansky will be sitting there learning for a year next year in 2026. And then 2027's on, and it's Mansky and Case Evans. And hopefully, if you get a 2027 guy, I mean, I would say the big guy in 2027 that Iowa State is after is Israel Abrams, which I will pull him up here in a second. That's going to be um, that's going to be that's going to be a fight. Israel Abrams is very highly recruited, highly rated. Yeah, he is now up to the second quarterback, the second rated quarterback in the 2027 class. I mean, you can see right there. I mean, Iowa State is absolutely in the hunt for them, but he's taking visits to Wisconsin, and I know Illinois has offered him. We'll see what happens, but Iowa State's in as good a position as anybody. Obviously, Tennessee has gotten him down to campus recently. Um, it will just it seems like it seems like they're in a good as good a spot as any to land this guy. And if he comes in, if Iowa State is able to land his commitment and keep him and all that, then he's a guy that can absolutely come in and be I don't know if he's good enough right off the bat that if he's good enough right off the bat to really be contending for the spot in 2027 or not. But we'll see. Uh Right. So maybe I've just been burned by where if we get Abrams, he's going to flip. So I get that. I 100% understand that because this 2026 has been a rough class for Iowa State in terms of getting flips. But here's my plea to you to not be as concerned about that. When we were on Jet Tamala, when we got his commitment, he was kind of like a high 3-star guy. After we offered him, and this was like after he like committed and all this, that is when he blew up into an Elite 11 guy, came up into a 4-star and all this. So, he was sort of undiscovered at that point, and then Alabama comes in. Israel Abrams is already the second rated quarterback in the class. He is under nobody's radar. Everybody that matters knows who Israel Abrams is. There is no, like, if Iowa State is able to, if Iowa State is able to get his commitment, to me, it's only because somebody else showed up with another bag that they weren't ready to offer before. But if Iowa State gets his commitment, the factor of he's undiscovered, but now a big program has found him, that is not a factor with Israel Abrams. Everybody knows who he is. He is the second rated quarterback in the class. I mean, that is, you can see it right there. He's the second rated quarterback in the class. There is no blue blood on this planet that does not know who Israel Abrams is. So if Iowa State were able to go in and get him, he doesn't have offers from all of the blue bloods necessarily, but this is a guy that if we can get him, I'm not as worried about him flipping because I think this would be a kid that he's a known elite prospect. This isn't a Jet Tamala situation or a JJ McCarthy situation where Iowa State was in first and then everybody else figured it out later. So I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm not saying Iowa State is going to get Israel Abrams. What I am saying is that they're currently in a good spot to potentially secure his commitment at some point. And if they are able to do that, I think there's a lot of reason to believe that they might be able to hang on to him. That's a guy that, when you're that highly rated, you are expected to at some point be an NFL quarterback, which means he will have money at some point. And Iowa State now has a reputation in the NFL because of Brock Purdy that Iowa State's quarterbacks are worth taking a look at. And if, when Rocco, after the 2026 season, when Rocco's heading out over to the NFL, if he is as good as he can be, he's probably a day 2 pick. And that will be partially because of Brock Purdy, because they got teams to pay attention and say, hey, by the way, Iowa State's quarterbacks, they can play. They're pretty smart. So Iowa State is currently in the process of establishing a lineage of quarterbacks to the NFL. And, Alex Mansky is hopefully in that lineage, and Israel Abrams absolutely could be in that lineage at some point. So we'll see. I don't know. Like, so this is probably, I believe he would be the highest rated, I'm pretty sure he would be the highest rated commitment of all time. So he would be just above JJ. So he's 9.619. He would be just short of Allen Lazard. So he would be the second best recruit, the second highest rated recruit in school history, just after Allen Lazard. Unfortunate graphic here. 4-star JJ is now at Appalachian. He finished at Appalachian State. Joe Skates at Memphis. Hunter Deo at Bowling Green. Hunter Deckers, Iowa Western. Jarrell Brock didn't finish with the program. JJ Bass didn't work out. But fortunately, this guy worked out. And I guess sorry, I don't have it on screen. But yeah, an unfortunate graphic right here. Yeah, definitely really great. Iowa State Hall of Famer, long NFL career. Didn't work out. Didn't finish. It could have been good, just didn't work. He had the gambling thing. Didn't work out. Don't know yet. Didn't work out. Gambling thing was good. Maybe not high 4-star good, but eh. Uh, Funny though that Iowa State's got 2 JJs in the top 3. But so unfortunately not like an awesome track record there of high end recruits. Oh my gosh, you go back here to like the early McCartney, you go back to the McCartney days. Didn't work out, didn't work out. He was okay. Could have been good, was good. Now he's at Maine. Greg Gaines, at Maine, Rhode Island. He's at Rhode Island. I don't even know if he's actually doing anything at Rhode Island or not, but he was supposed to be good. Jake Campos was good. You know, there's Jeffrey Roberts though. That's fun. He's having a nice year for Dowling. So, anyways, all this is to say that Iowa State is got still some potential good players to get for 2026, and they're in the hunt for some really, really nice players in 2027 to where they can have one of the best, they have the targets, and they're in with some 2027 guys that could end up making that the best class in school history. If you get Israel Abrams, if you can get Landon Blum, if you can get Slagle, the offensive lineman from Grinnell, if you can get that trio, that would be incredible, especially with some of those Omaha guys you got there. Even though Jet's not in there now, but if you got those, tossed in there with the class from Omaha this year, Will Slagle is a composite 90. Landon Blum's a composite 90. Tate Wallace is a composite 90. Savion Miller, composite 88. Gavin Stecker, composite 88. These are all just Iowa. These are just kids from Iowa that Iowa State has a decent shot at. So we will see. But even through a rough 2026 cycle, there's still hope. And I do believe Case Evans is a talented kid that if he can get a good grasp in the offense and he shows good leadership, that he absolutely can be in the running to compete for the job when Rocco's done. So that's kind of really where I'm going with that. So, okay. Last little bit here that I already teased in at the beginning of the show and is in the title of the show, but let's talk a little bit about Penn State. So, Penn State just paid $50 million to have James Franklin not coach for them. After you're pretty consistently winning 10, 11 games, 11 games every regular season, one play away from a national title last year, and they decided that wasn't good enough. Now, granted, this season, not good enough. But I kind of would have thought he would have earned a little bit more capital to stick around, but it is what it is. Naturally, because it is an open coaching position somewhere in the sport of football, Matt Campbell has obviously been floated for it. It's extremely predictable. Everybody knew it was coming. It is what it is. Everything that I have seen suggests that their top two are Curt Cignetti and Matt Rule. I think that if I were Penn State, those are the first two names I would call, is Curt Cignetti and Matt Rule. And I will tell you why I would call Matt Rule ahead of Matt Campbell. So Curt Cignetti, I don't know if we really need to go too much into this. Turned Indiana into a power. Indiana's talent profile on their roster, if you just look at raw recruiting ratings, Indiana's talent profile looks very much like Iowa State's. It's a bunch of 3 stars and like 2 4 stars. There's as far as like the recruiting stars talent level, Indiana is basically where Iowa State is, but Indiana just went into Eugene, Oregon and beat the Ducks. So, if Curt was interested in continuing to move up the coaching ladder, that would be a pretty logical place to go. I think he would probably do a very good job at Penn State. I think Penn State should back the Brinks truck up to Bloomington and see if you can get him. And if you can, awesome. If you can't, I'm going to call Matt Rule if I'm Penn State. Why am I calling Matt Rule instead of Matt Campbell? Is it because I think Matt Rule is a better coach than Matt Campbell? No, I will never believe that. Matt Campbell beat Matt Rule on a number of occasions, and I just think Matt Rule is an asshole, flat out. I don't think he is the reason that his teams generally win. Matt Rule grew up in State College, Pennsylvania. He grew up in Happy Valley, and he was a walk-on linebacker for Joe Paterno in the 90s. He got his first kind of major head coaching gig at Temple in Philadelphia. His roots are Pennsylvania, period. They are. So he's easy to sell, as lots of connections to the university. He also has a track record in college of rebuilding, of retooling and rebuilding programs. Now, he doesn't typically tend to stick around in a program long enough for us to find out if he's actually like a good, like long-term coach versus just a program fixer, like a program builder versus a program fixer. But he did it at Temple. He did it at Baylor. And now he's doing it at Nebraska, who went to their first bowl game in like 15 years, or 10 years anyways. And they're absolutely on pace to do that again. But the reason, and what Matt Campbell's done at Iowa State is totally incontestable. Like, I mean, he's the best coach in Iowa State history, and it's not even close. That's not even like disrespectful to Dan McCarney or Johnny Majors or whoever. It's Matt Campbell, a massive gap, and then everybody else. But the reason that if I'm Penn State, I'm calling Matt Rule first is because Nebraska has mojo right now, and Iowa State has lost 2 in a row. And Nebraska will probably continue to win some games. They have a couple games left that they could lose, but for the most part, Nebraska's probably going to win like 8 games, maybe 9. And Matt Campbell could win 10 games. Absolutely still on the table to win 10. We just talked about it. But we also just talked about how the secondary is depleted, and if things aren't quite going right, they could lose a few more and finish 7-5. That's absolutely on the table for Iowa State. As much as I don't want to admit it, it absolutely is. If you are the Penn State administration, if I have to sell them on either Matt Rule, who just went 8-4 at Nebraska, or Matt Campbell that just went 7-5 at Iowa State, if you're going to ignore all available contexts, which fans will, because generally speaking, college football fans are dumb as shit. Fan bases, not individual fans. Fan bases are dumb, and they don't look at context. They just say Matt Campbell went 7-5, or Matt Campbell went 8-4, or whatever it is, and they don't apply any context to, like, by the way, Iowa State's kind of a hard job. They won a bunch of games that they maybe shouldn't have. All this, and like, they're not going to apply context to it. But you just fired a coach that wins 10, 11 games a season. You have to make a hire that feels good to the fans when you hire them. If Matt Campbell doesn't finish the season as well as he wants to, or as well as we want him to, it's going to be a lot harder to sell that to Penn State fans, because they need a splashy hire. They do. They absolutely need a splashy hire right now. And for Penn State fans, I don't think Matt Campbell is a sexy hire. I think he'd be a great hire. I think Matt Campbell would kill it at Penn State. I don't think he's a sexy enough hire for Penn to please the Penn State crowd. Matt Rule probably is, even if I think he would probably have a lot of success there in the first couple of years. Like, I think he could get that thing back to the playoff, get it turned around, and all this. I think he would be able to fix that program and get them back to the playoff, and win a title, I don't know, but competing for one, getting into the semifinals again and all that. I think he could do that. But beyond that, we don't really know. He's never been in a place long enough for us to get a good feel for what he can do if he stays at a program for 8 years or something like that. We don't know. We just don't know. And unfortunately, that's just the way things are going to work. I think in college football now is they have to hit a splash higher. They paid too much money to make James Franklin go away. So you back the Brinks truck up to get Kurt Signetti. If not, you ask Matt Rule what kind of check he needs, and you write the check. The other one here, if you're like, there's another name here that would be interesting that I think they'll get a call. Well, he'll get a call, maybe two more names that I think we'll get a call along with Matt Campbell. Matt Campbell will absolutely get a call for an interview. Whether he takes it, I don't know. Probably I would be shocked if he didn't take the interview at least. Manny Diaz down at Duke has done a really nice job, and he was a DC at Penn State. He's got ties there. I think he would be a really interesting name there. Duke's kind of a cushy job now. It's a pretty good it's a pretty good gig now. So maybe Manny Diaz doesn't really want to leave and doesn't want to deal with the circus that is Penn State. Eli Drinkwitz is another one that I think would absolutely be a candidate. I would, if I were Penn State, I would be giving Eli Drinkwitz a call. Now, I believe that there has never been a coach in the history of the state of Missouri that has ever screamed head football coach in Missouri more than Eli Drinkwitz. That guy is Captain Chaos. But he does a good job. Missouri's competitive. I think if you're Penn State, you give him a call and see what his interest level is. He may want to stay because Missouri is competitive in the SEC right now. Will they be forever? I don't know. Probably not. But he's got him there right now, and he's a good coach. So Eli Drinkwitz is there. The sleeper name, if you were looking for another one, is probably Pat Fitzgerald. I think that would be a really interesting name. He's available. He did a really good job at Northwestern with basically no resources whatsoever. I don't know if the Penn State fans would love that, but he's got a track record of winning and with far fewer resources. And, I think he would try to win in a way that is roughly in line with how Penn State typically likes to do. All this is to say, there are a lot of candidates that could potentially fit the Penn State job. Matt Campbell is one of them. I am not personally going to spend a single further second of my time or a single calorie of energy worrying about Matt Campbell going to Penn State. If he does, he does. It is what it is. We find a new guy and we move on. It would be unfortunate, but Matt Campbell's been here 10 years. That's about 6 years or more than a lot of us thought he would be here. And we got a decade out of him. We got by far the most successful run of football in the school's history. I don't don't believe he will leave. If I were a bet man, I would put money on on Matt Campbell being the head coach at Iowa State next year. But if he's not, it is what it is. It's fine. Iowa State will continue. Life will move on. There is no point in worrying about it. I'm not telling you that you're crazy for worrying about it. I'm not saying that you are wrong for worrying about it or that it's not like sometimes justifiable to do that. But what I am saying is that there are a lot of things in this world that are worth worrying about. And whether or not Matt Campbell goes to Penn State should be very far down on that list. Obviously, now that Iowa State's made a Big 12 title game, we want to get back there. We want to feel like we can be at the top of the Big 12 every year. I get it. I really do. And I'm totally with you there. And it can feel like if we lose Matt Campbell, like what happens? Are we going to be able to find someone that can do the job? Are they still going to be a good program? Are we going to go back to sucking? Like, it's a fair concern from everybody, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. If we get there, I don't think we're going to get there. Not this year. But if we do, it is what it is. And we'll be all here to, if that happens, I'll be here. We'll be streaming. We'll talk about it. We'll talk through it. And it is what it is. Until then, let's continue to enjoy the fact that we are now bitching and complaining about a 5-2 Iowa State football team that still has a chance to win 10 games. Let's take a step back and understand where we're at right now. The sky is falling because Iowa State's 5-2. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up for this week. I appreciate everybody tuning in, everybody watching, as I do every week. I appreciate people hopping in the comments, giving good conversation, bringing in whenever you can. Obviously, no game this weekend. I did not do a post game after Colorado because I was just, for a while after the game, it was just going to be just me cussing on here for about 45 minutes, and I didn't. Nobody needs that. And by the time Sunday morning rolled around, it's like, you know what? I'd rather just move on and just move on to talking about what we can do to fix this and continuing to look forward. So that's why I didn't do a post game last weekend. So everybody, I appreciate you tuning in. Appreciate the conversation. We'll be back again next Tuesday, 7 p.m. Central Time, 8 p.m. Eastern. You're on the Voice of College Football Network. Everybody have a great rest of your week. Have a good, fun weekend. I believe Mr. C. Finney 16 there in the comments. He's getting married this weekend, so congratulations to him. And we will see everybody here next week. Go Cyclones.